I'll be talking about how important the very moment that you're in now, and of course this next now that's right now, and they keep going. In other words, how important your present moment is. That's what I'll be talking about today here. The value of now and the value of hybrid contextual awareness that we can start taking advantage of with the smartphones that are in our pockets, and another topic which I call the context war. A little bit of history on me, not going so far back as the scythe. We'll go back to 1998 in North America when Philips decided to compete for control of the digital living room. They were competing against Sony, Mitsubishi, Matsushita, Hitachi, the Apple, Microsoft. Everybody thought they wanted to own the digital living room and be able to somehow or another monetize people's attention when they're relaxing, listening to music, watching television. So 4 other people and I were asked to come up with a strategy for Philips to deal with that. What we came up with was the Philips Ambient Intelligence Strategy. By 2001, it had been adopted by Philips worldwide. A couple of years later, it was adopted by the EU for the 6th framework as a guide for how to invest in high technology. Only now are a great many of the elements of the Ambient Intelligence Strategy being used across the globe in corporate planning. So it was an accomplishment that was a bit before its time, but one I'm proud of. Farther back in history, my hero is Alfred North Whitehead, a British theorist and writer who grew up during the previous technological revolution, the revolution of the age of steam, the Industrial Revolution. He was able to, because he watched the transitions, the changes in tools, the developments of the affordances of our daily lives, because of these new tools that were introduced, he was able to see and think about how society would be changed. And one of the points that he realized, one of the points that he made, was that civilization advances by extending the number of important operations that we can perform without thinking about those. Now that's what that smartphone in your pocket will very soon be able to do. I'll be talking about that later. The point is to not interrupt you when something needs to be done, but allow you to stay on task, allow you to maintain your focus, and then when some kind of an assistive technology does need to help you for some good reason, then and only then are you interrupted, and interrupted minimally by the right medium at the right time for the right amount of interruption. That's a benefit. That's doing it in such a way that doesn't spike your cognitive load in your moment, in the now, keeping the value of your now, your performance in the now, as high as possible at all times. Now we have a context awareness timeline here, which probably isn't readable at your distance. If you'd like the slides, just let me know. The next major development in terms of context awareness and supportiveness for the individual user was the invention of the secretary. I don't know when somebody invented the secretary. What a wonderful thing. That person is obviously quite intelligent. That person is able to assist the employer and anticipate the employer's needs in a way that's subtle, that's supportive, that's not interruptive any more than necessary. And now we can start to put some of that kind of functionality into our tools, into the smartphone that's in our pocket. The company Siri, which you can see farther over to the right, was a spin out from Stanford SRI International, which ran the world's largest artificial intelligence project. It was run in the United States, I believe funded by the Defense Department. So it spun out some of the artificial intelligence tools and functionality from that project, and within less than 6 or 8 months after Siri became an independent company, Apple Computer was paying sufficient attention to realize we need that functionality in our smartphone, and bought the company. Other processes are going on in parallel with that. What I can tell you now is that those other processes currently amount today to what I call the context war. The war between devices that can help you, devices that are contextually aware of your life, your goals, your plans, and your history in order to assist you going forward every day. So we're enmeshed in that context war right now. It's between primarily 2 platforms, the Android platform and the iPhone platform. There are other players. The interesting thing about this war is that it's playing for more value. It's a war for the biggest land grab opportunity, land rush, gold rush in modern technology history, in my estimation. Because if you can provide, if you're one of the providers, either on the Apple side or the Android side, of the kinds of contextually aware supportive services mediated through and gathered by your cell phone for every individual, that individual is going to come to have an extremely tight relationship with you. And just like David was saying, the authenticity, the provision of value to that end individual, that end user, why would you want to give that up? What that then means is you would be able, as a provider of those contextually aware services, to build a relationship with the user for their lifetime, and then monetize that. Monetize that for you yourself as the vendor, but also for the individual. Like we heard yesterday, the co-creation, the collaboration of gathering information, filtering information, seeking patterns, and then creating value from that that value must also return to the individual too. It must be shared. That's why and how such a plan could possibly be successful. It can't just be in the interest of the corporation providing the service. So if you are the corporation providing that service, the vendor, and you are gathering a person's contextual history on many different dimensions, the most fundamental one being their location as you go through time, but many other dimensions too, and then you process that using good, strong, powerful artificial intelligence code in the cloud, then what you're doing is you're being able to start to provide constant scenario support for every individual. The reason that this is all going to start with smartphones is simply because there are so many different situations that you find yourself in with your phone. Diversity in use cases, which means a highly adaptable, highly situationally aware service. The phone is sensing what you're doing. The phone is sensing what you're interested in, where you're going, where you've been. That enables an ability to respond to all these different diverse use cases. The second reason why it's starting with mobility, with phones, is simply that your attention already is a scarce resource. It's one of the most scarce resources you have. When you're moving, when you're traveling, walking on your bicycle in a car, your attention is even more scarce. So those are two very good driving forces to cause contextual awareness to be starting in the vicinity of smartphones and then build out from there. If these phones can deliver contextually aware services when you need it and the amount you need it, and in ways that actually help your life, and especially know when to not do anything, when to not interrupt, you've got great value. So context plus value to the individual, the salience of information that can be provided given the context you're in, that is what's going to make this happen. Now, to have it happen, the way to implement it is we have to have a lot of hybridization. Hybrid inputs, highly parallel hybrid inputs to your device, your phone. What is your phone sensing? It's sensing things about the data stream that you're sending via email and texts, the data stream in the voice, the terms, terminology, semantic analysis of the conversations you have on your phone, but also other kinds of inputs too. What's the humidity? What's the atmospheric pressure? The wind speed around you, the brightness of the day, and gathering huge amounts of this data, performing pattern recognition, pattern analysis on this in order to then project what this new situation is that you find yourself in tomorrow, what the parallels are to previous situations. Then run those analytics, highly adaptive, highly multiplied ways to analyze the same data. In other words, hybrid. Hybrid methods work so well. They provide a kind of redundancy that we find in nature. And finally, we need more than just the little displays on our phone. That's way, way too limiting. We need other methods of getting information, supportive, contextually aware information to individuals, primarily hearing. We're so limited to using visual information right now. I'm just surprised that most people don't have a Bluetooth headset in their ear most of the time, because it's so much more useful to have that than to have to look down at your phone. That will change, I believe. I believe it has to change. But the information configuration services aren't there yet. That's the reason we're not carrying them. The models that we have to be able to deliver these hybrid methods of data collection, hybrid methods of data analysis, and hybrid methods of data display, the biological models are out there. That's what we can use to build the computer architecture, the software architecture that can deliver these services, the analysis, and the end result. Most species, especially prey species, like the rabbit you see in the lower left corner here, they have multiple ways of perceiving their environment for their own safety. A rabbit, we can think of a rabbit, of course, having big ears, but notice the eyes on this rabbit. The eyes are on the sides of its head. That's very common in prey species, so they can see a great deal more than you and I can, since we tend to be a predator species. They can see larger fields of view, and this is fascinating to me. A rabbit has stereo vision just like we do, except it's not out front where our stereo vision is, where we can see depth if one is chasing prey. Rabbits, their stereo vision is above them, in a cone above their heads. Why is that? It's because the most dangerous prey, the most dangerous predator for them is birds, hawks. They can tell how fast that bird is swooping down to attack them really, really well, because they have a multiplicity of ways to perceive their environment. Our systems, our devices, our phones have to have a multiplicity of ways to perceive the environment in order to provide us with the most value that we can have going forward. So from nature, we learn two really powerful rules in my estimation. One is nature is always on. Our devices should be always on, should be always gathering information, useful contextual information about our situation, our lives, and our history. Secondly, nature is always doing hybrid sensing and is prepared to do a hybrid response to deal with whatever circumstances, whatever scenario comes up in the next minute, the next second. Now, to emulate that in hardware, we've got the phone doing lots of sensing. We'll have the phone doing a great deal more sensing, and especially when sensors, including the compass even, can use a lot less power. Right now, they're very power hungry. Then that can run all the time. That can run 24/7. There's a lot of phrases that we use to describe this kind of functionality. IBM came up with the phrase pervasive computing many years ago. Context awareness, the semantic web, things that think is a phrase that's being used. I think that came out of MIT originally. The term I'm using is hyper-personalized services because that tends to focus it back on us instead of on the devices. Now, the biological models are not limited to other species. In the human species, the biological model that I think may well be useful for software and hardware architecture, for service delivery architectures, is the brain's default mode network. The default mode network of the brain consists of two linked constellations of areas that are extremely active, that are most active in our minds when we're not on a particular task. I might say typing would be a task. When we're just being there, thinking, being yourself, that's when the default mode network is most active. It does two functions. Number one, it's paying attention to the world around you. It's context or state aware of that moment. And one of the most important things, because we're a social species, one of the most important things of that state, that circumstance around you in the moment, is the intent of other humans. Kind of like that rabbit, because one of the most dangerous possible elements of our physical environment is other people in terms of our evolutionary development. We have to be very aware of the intent of other people. Now, psychologists and people paying attention to neuro everything, the term for that is the theory of mind. So we can have, as a human, we can have a theory of mind, the mental state of other people. As it turns out, some of the other species can have a theory of mind too. They can put themselves in your place. Chimpanzees have an ability to do that to a certain extent. Some of the cetacean species. So that's one area, one of the two areas of function that the default mode network of the brain has. The other one is scenario planning, thinking about what you might do next. Those two functions put together are almost certainly a chunk of our consciousness. And what a useful way to think about developing context-aware services for the phone. Now, Alan Kay talked about where the IT world, the industry of IT, is going a few years ago in 2009. And he said it's going to all be about long-term sustaining relationships between companies and their customers. In terms of context awareness, it's going to be a couple more words. It's going to be about long-term sustaining, contextually dynamic, hyper-personalized relationships between vendors and end users, you and me. And it will be very profitable for those vendors, and it will be profitable and helpful for us. Those vendors are currently in the midst of the context war. And that's why the Nortel patents became so important. That's why Kodak is about to sell its patents. That's why Motorola was just purchased by Google, to integrate the hardware, the software, the operating system, the methods of provision of content and services completely vertically, so it's highly predictable and highly configurable for the end user, so that they can develop that long-term relationship, that ability to count on that device in your pocket instead of have to learn to use another piece of software on it, how to have to configure it, how to reconfigure it, and then the next version you get is going to have to learn it all over again. That doesn't work. A managed device platform makes that easier, makes it more possible for the relationship to be important instead of the device to be important. So that's the context war for global domination. I've determined, at least temporarily, I've decided that there are 8 levels of context, 8 layers. Starting with location, the basic element of context is where are you and where have you been, that trail of you through space and time. Then working our way up, go one step out from that is what's the device sensing around you? So that's awfully important to pay attention to if your device is context aware. The next step outwards from that is what are you doing with the device? Are you making phone calls on it? Are you talking? Are you searching? Are you writing? And beyond that, we can go to what are you near, the proximities? What buildings are you near? What vehicle is approaching you should step out of the way of? What jurisdiction did you just walk into that's sensed electromagnetically? What you just walked into a Wi-Fi area, or you walked into an area where there is some manner of civil control over your activities in that area. Moving up a little bit more, can that phone sense physical elements of your metabolism? Very, very valuable. As we move up this rank from bottom to top, I believe that you have more and more opportunity to create value with this information when you analyze it, when you integrate it, when you add it together over time. Finally, we go up into the cloud for 6, 7, and 8. We have the live data feeds that you subscribe to, the emergent live data that can come in, like a phone call. You can't predict that, you're not subscribing to it. And finally, what a service provider can do with all these different other 7 levels of contextual data to become a context brokerage service, taking your information on an agreement with you and turn that into value for the company and for you. So, individual up to the cloud, and then turn that into value. The various kinds of context, I won't touch on these. They're available if you'd like the slides. What to gather, how to gather, and how to use that information. As long as that information is used with permission from the end user and revenue sharing to the end user. It needs to be, as we heard yesterday, collaboration in vending that information, collaboration in maintaining it, providing it, and it all has to be built within a very secure, very private service, which so far doesn't exist. That's a huge area that is required. It's the fulcrum upon which everything else depends. Somehow you have to be able to trust somebody with your data. I don't think that's going to be the telcos. I think you're going to have to find other ways of turning a relationship with a corporation into one that's actually trusted. I'll give you very briefly a use case here. Entertainment. That came up in the beginning of 2007 when I was asked by a friend who got a contract to design theme parks, 4 theme parks, all the attractions, 4 theme parks in Dubai Land. He said, I've got this notion. I want to give somebody, whenever they walk into the park, I want to give them a key. I call it the key with a capital K, and on this will reside their friend for the day. This friend will learn about them and be able to help them, tell them where to go, where the restaurants are, what the neat thing is to do over there, get to know them and learn about what their interests are over time. And is this doable? Is this possible? He said, can you figure this out for me? And if so, how it would work, what the infrastructure would be, what the elements are. So that was a lot of fun. I had a great time doing that. By the middle of 2007, that effort was completed. By the end of 2008, the entire 100 square mile Dubai Land development, which I'm told was the largest contract that McKinsey ever had to manage, completely stopped because of the economic crash. But we figured out that kind of contextual services, if you put a character on top of them, what I would call a character skin, you've got a friend for the day. And if it's well managed, if it's well implemented, you've got a friend for life. Spider-Man can go home with little Billy or little Bridget and talk to the children the next day or the next year about something that must be relevant to them, to their family, but also probably involves some amount of transactions, which is why the companies that support it would ever pay for it to begin with. So virtual characters, real services, physical world. If you've got useful information available about the physical world, again, like Tom was talking about yesterday, that can be provided to you wherever you are, that's local information about a place. Back in history, somebody called the spirit of a place the genius loci. And from that, it seems to me that there's a great deal of value to be created in putting useful information about a place out into the world, available to you through your smartphone at any time. And in my estimation, the most likely way to deliver that is by voice with the Bluetooth headset in your ear, in which case I would call that the whisper interface. So wherever you go, you've got built into your environment, into your phone, useful information that you would otherwise have to stop somebody and ask them. If I don't speak Danish, I'm less likely to be able to get the answer that I need, although fortunately, the Danes are so well educated that even my limited English is pretty effective. So I'll get back to the value of now very briefly. We're out of time. Ad hoc P2P mobile sensor nets are simply another way to say your phone should be able to communicate with everybody else's phone in the room and the phones of people a block away who are all have sensors and all are providing a common conversation about what's most important right now. If a fire breaks out in a building nearby, an ad hoc mobile sensor net would find that important enough to pass along to all of you on your phones right now. That's an example of it. Another example here is traffic. This is the way we do it now on the internet. If you have, your phone is implemented to be able to join ad hoc mobile sensor nets, wherever it is, it could be trading information about the traffic in a variety of areas as it goes through those areas and then let go of that information as it passes through it. So it's very, very short-term knowledge that you can discard as you leave. That knowledge never has to live in the cloud. It never has to live on a server. It can live just between the devices, which is not something that I think telcos right now think is a good idea. But I believe they'll come to decide that's very, very helpful in a variety of ways for the individual and for the telcos, even if they're not involved. Now I've got a couple of diagrams here that talk about how context awareness can help us in everyday life. You're welcome to them if you like. At the bottom, it shows some of the players. Most recently, I found out about Samantha Star and Proximal Labs as being AI companies. And this is how your device will operate as it's looking for information, creating information, sending out information that's sensor related, behavior related to other phones, to the cloud, to the context brokerage vendor that you've signed up with, and trying to help you get through your day in your now and help provide value in your constant next scenario. This is how I try to remember it. I've got a few stickers here if anybody would like one. I'd like to also thank both Tom and Alphonse. Yesterday, they provided a high-level overview of the way many of these topics that we're talking about today can happen. Today, I sandblasted them down to some core functionality, and we can proceed in our discussion from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claude. It was a little bit fast at the end there, for me anyway. Maybe you could give us an example or two of some predictive services that you see, services that are about my next.
The predictive analytics that I alluded to on one of the slides, there's an interesting thing going on with that. I had 3 different kinds of analytics. One of them is the middle one in that diagram was talking about analytics of the moment, analyzing your current state. I think what's going to happen is that once you've got good cloud-based analytics about your current situation, that's going to feel like predictive analytics because it's increasing your awareness in that moment of what's going on enabling you to predict better what you should do next, enable you to decide more finely tuned ways of determining your next scenario, your choice of the next scenario. Predictive things, the examples that you see in the literature and in popular articles are, oh, you know, you're going over, I can see that you've got this appointment at 3 o'clock in this such and such a place. You'll have to be going almost by where you have to pick up your laundry. That's a trivial example, but it's a real world example, if you have laundry.
I was looking towards one of your slides where you had 2013,
yes,
and it stated that context-aware tools begin to disappear.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that fact?
Certainly, and I'd love to. I tried to move fast, and I skipped over that part.
Of course.
Artificial intelligence in the artificial intelligence community is often defined as whenever you implement some artificial intelligence in your software, people will then say, well, that's not really artificial intelligence because you can do it. AI is something that you, by definition, aren't able to do yet. But as soon as you do implement it, as soon as you do have, like Siri has with the artificial intelligence functionality derived from the Callow project, the same thing is going to happen with context-aware functionality. As it becomes implemented, as it becomes incorporated into our tools, into our devices, we're going to just assume it's there because it's so right, because it's so appropriate. It makes it so easy. Like this machine tool for harvesting that we just demonstrated. If it feels that easy, you assume that it was always there or always should be there. Well, of course it's supposed to be like that. One example from the world of smartphones is HTC. I think it was 2009 that they implemented their Sense interface add-ons. One example of that is if you sat down at a table to meet with someone and set your HTC phone down on the table, you probably set it down facing up. And that way, if something comes up on the screen, you can see it. But if that phone rings and you're in the midst of a conversation, you don't want to bother anybody, the HTC Sense, contextually aware in the physical layer, the second layer there in my diagram, it knows if you turn the phone over and it'll shut off the ringer. Now that makes so much sense. It's so obvious, so simple. So in a certain sense, trivial seeming, that's what's going to happen with contextual awareness applications. It's great, it's so helpful.
That's good. We've got some questions coming in through Twitter here, and it seems that David, you're answering some of them, but maybe, which is great. Keep doing that. Clark, people are talking about data and how we can handle it. Who should we entrust with our data, and should we not try to be managers of our own data? What about the data? It's probably the first time you've ever had that question.
It's not the first time. I've sure asked it a lot. Some people several years ago started a company called Trust E, with a little E at the end. And their initial business plan, they thought, yes, we will develop a way to preserve people's data, gather it, and then make use of it, control the use of it. And we should contact the telcos, because of course they're right in the data stream if it's data being gathered by a smartphone. And their second data plan didn't involve telcos at all, because they went out and talked to users, and most users simply don't trust their telephone company to do that. So that's one group that you apparently can't use now. Another group that I suggest nobody would want to use, nobody who's paying attention, is Facebook, because Facebook hasn't exactly caused its users to think they can really trust Facebook with their attention. So who does that leave? Well, Google is being more careful by far than Facebook about their attention, but Google's made a couple of mistakes. LinkedIn had a really good reputation until about a month ago, and they started using individuals' pictures to endorse, because somebody is a member of LinkedIn and they joined some group or is using some add-on service that LinkedIn has. Suddenly, without asking these users, LinkedIn was using their name as an endorsement. That didn't help their trust reputation. So trust reputation is going to take active building on the part of whoever these people are that provide context brokerage services. They're going to have to prove that they can protect your information, keep it secure, meter it out in ways that are approved by you, because you have to be in control of what they do with your information. You're going to make money on it, great. You're going to split the revenue with it, great. But you have to have confidence in them. That's going to take the kind of construction effort that it took to build the pyramids, because not many corporations are that trusted right now.
Okay. Should we see if there's a question from the audience here?
I'm just being a little provocative here. So what is king? Content or conversation or both?
Well, I've used the phrase, I think it came from Nokia originally, context is king. I think it's maybe about 3 years old or so. A researcher at Nokia came up with it as far as I know. Context is king in what context? Well, in the context of making decisions, in the context of managing your constant next scenario choice. So it's not a matter of or, it's a matter of when and how. The conversation is king in the context of the relationship that a corporation or an individual or an organization would want to have with other people or other organizations. And because we're a social species, the conversation in another sense is always king. Because without communication, you know.
You mentioned Nokia.
Yes.
And context awareness and the context being the king.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about aesthetics because Nokia gained prevalence over Ericsson going back by actually opting for a less engineer-based solution because they opted out they took out the antenna of their mobile phones and became hugely successful in doing so. Even though there wasn't a technical explanation for it, it was aesthetics primarily. It made me wonder because you were talking about how we should ideally all be wearing Bluetooth headsets, and I mean, for aesthetic reasons, I think that there might be someone in the audience who'd not want to do that. Right. If tools should learn the user, shouldn't they take aesthetics into consideration and maybe a variety of parameters that aren't as easy to dissect and recognize? What
you've just referred to is lifestyle. Lifestyle choices. I'm never going to wear Jimmy Choo shoes. That's a lifestyle choice on my part. I might choose to wear a Bluetooth headset most of the time because I want to use my visual focus to pay attention to certain things around me and let updates and notifications and things come in on my audio channel. But that's a choice. Okay. There will be some tactile interfaces that can help us more, especially with focusing our attention. That's going to be integrated with clothing choices in ways that really haven't been decided yet. There are tactical awareness vests that jet fighter pilots wear now to know where, oh, I'm getting vibrated over here on my shoulder. That means that there's a threat up there. So it's time for me to turn around. Wonderful method, not exactly useful for consumers. For
I have one in pink, actually.
That's right, you do. That's right.
If I may jump in on that one, you're also, Motorola was the first with the Atrix and the lapdog. Asus now has the phone that slides into the tablet. I think we're starting to see a really interesting convergence of a core tool that will be designed to be placed into other tools based on what I want to do with it at the time. And you know, the Motorola piece is cool, doesn't work, got some issues with it, I'm sure the Asus piece will as well, but I think you're starting to see the beginning of that ability to swap out like the Swiss Army knife kind of mechanism with something at the heart of it that's your context-aware tool.
Absolutely. For a literary citation, Roger Zelazny's book, Last Exit to Babylon, refers to this kind of a tool where you insert it into other systems and other devices, and it carries your machine intelligence and your context awareness with it.
Okay. We're in overtime, but is there a last question from the audience just to make sure that no one's left behind there? No?
Can I ask one?
Yes.
Yeah. Is my mic on? Is it on? So that harvesting tool, when you brought that to the airport, did you check that in, or?
Unfortunately, the Innovation Lab provided it.
Oh, thank you.
Wouldn't have made it through.
It's just anyone who knows U.S. airports, that would have been an interesting experience.
Yes, it would have.
We've got a bit of everything.
There you go.
I'm sure.